Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I am Agi Keramidas and my mission is to inspire you to rise up, grow, stand out and take action towards the next level of your life. I am interviewing leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, exceptional people who can and will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week, every Monday and Thursday. In today's show, I am excited to speak with David Bailey. David, you have professional expertise as a certified clinical hypnotherapist, an NLP master practitioner, and a 3 Principles life coach. And you work with clients from around the world and help them to achieve powerful, positive, permanent changes and to create a meaningful life. On your own spiritual journey, you have studied meditation at the Mahasi Meditation Center in Burma, and you have lived with the Shipibo tribe and the shaman in the Amazon rainforest. David, welcome to Personal Development Mastery. I'm delighted to be speaking with you today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Hey, thank you for having me. Yeah, and just a quick thing that the life coaching is, I think, is beyond the 3 principles stuff now, so I've kind of moved away from doing that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure. It's something that we'll talk about at 3 principles as well.
Cool.
But before we go there, you have a journey that is certainly fascinating, to say the least, from an outside point of view. So let's start with your journey, really. So 18 months ago, you left your entire life in the UK to move to start a new life, a career in Thailand, and with everything that happened, you completely changed as a human. So I'll let you share the story and in specific, maybe some key defining moments or some pivotal moments along this journey.
Yeah. So I'd been married for about 3 years. I was living in the UK, working in London, working in media, doing the coaching and the workshops and this kind of stuff on a part-time basis. And it was always a dream of mine to live in a foreign country, to move to Asia. And also I wanted to be with my wife because she was from Korea originally and wanted to be close to her family. And so we came to the decision that we were going to move to Thailand. It was somewhere we'd been on our honeymoon, somewhere that I knew and loved. I'd been over there and I'd seen there's a lot of like wellness stuff going on. There's a lot of retreats, spas, people doing different kind of Reiki and healing and spirituality. And I thought there's opportunities here for personal development. So I got in touch with some of these places that mainly they're on Phuket and Samui. And they're usually like very luxurious, high-end retreats that people go to. I didn't know anyone at all in that world, but I managed to, through just sheer persistence, get some interviews with some of the top places in Thailand. And I did like a ridiculous amount of interviews. I remember for one place I did like 7 hours of interviews, and eventually, after like doing so many different trials, they said, well, why don't you come out and meet us? So I booked a trip out there before deciding to move, and did some interviews, and then had like a verbal job offer that I could work there if I was to come. And so I remember thinking like, yes, this is like, you know, I'm going to go there. I'm going to be working in these like beautiful retreats in paradise. My wife was going to come out 6 months later. She wanted to open a restaurant, and, you know, I had it all planned, like this dream life on the beach with my wife, living in paradise. So I took the leap, moved out there, and after a fairly short period of time, it became clear that my wife wasn't really intending to move there, that because we'd been living apart for about a year and a half, and the relationship had been quite strained. It hadn't been going well, and this was an attempt to really save the relationship, if you will. And it became obvious that she wasn't willing to do the move. And I didn't want to live apart. We'd been, almost 2 years living separately and just commuting from Korea to the UK. So we discussed it and decided that the best thing to do would be to divorce, which was a very difficult decision. It's something that I'd felt, things hadn't been going well, but I'd like put all my faith, if I move to Thailand, this can, potentially fix everything. So that decision was made, and at the same time, the job offer that I'd been given only verbally, it wasn't like a written contract. When I actually moved there, the wellness manager had changed. They'd got a new manager in, and again, it kind of became clear that there was a slight conflict in interest, because I was doing life coaching, this person was also doing life coaching, and they didn't want two life coaches within the same organization. So it was just a struggle to get things done. And there was another place that I was also doing some work in, and there was a lot of politics, and you had to be friends with this person, and it just reminded me of office politics. And so it wasn't the thing that I'd imagined. I thought, oh, when I get there, it's going to be me doing these amazing like retreats, and it wasn't that. It was people not being very direct with me, the frustration in not being able to do the work I wanted in the way that I wanted it to do, and and the marriage also realizing and being honest that this really is not like what I want. I don't want to be living estranged from my wife in a foreign country, and I need to be honest about this relationship and what we need to do. And that was a really critical point in the journey, because it was a very hard choice. And I remember specifically when all this was happening, another thing that, as a result of the job not happening in the way that I'd imagined, I also was now responsible for getting my own visa, which is like a legal requirement to work in a country. And if I don't know if you've ever been to Thailand, but it's very difficult as a foreigner. People will try and overcharge you or get money from you. And when we're talking about a visa, this is a lot of money, like thousands of pounds. And the consequences of it going wrong are you get kicked out the country. So it was actually very stressful at that point, because I had to try and find, well, who can I trust in this environment? Nobody wants to talk about it honestly, because some people have visas, some don't, and I don't know the language, I don't know the law fully. I managed to find somewhere that was a lawyer that was doing visas for foreigners, and I remember, in order to get that, I needed to get to Kota Bharu in southern Malaysia, and it was a very expensive flight. I was paying for this Thai lawyer. I was also paying for an English lawyer for my divorce, and I was like, I don't want to spend a load of money on this flight. So I went across land, which was very uncomfortable, train, minibus, taxi, like 24 hours. Got to the embassy. This is after having gone through with a lawyer about, you get there, you're given the paper, you'll have the visa, it should be all good. And I paid a lot of money for this, like thousands of pounds in cash. Still a little bit nervous. So I did this trip. I arrived in Malaysia after this 24 hours of not much sleep and sweating. Got to the embassy thinking I'm just going to go get my papers, bang, back into Thailand. Get there, and they're like, no, sorry, you're missing these documents. And I was like, you sure? Yeah, sorry. And the woman at the embassy was probably the least helpful person you could have met, and literally like just turned her back on me. So I'm like, man, I've paid all this money. What's going on? I I managed to find my way to the hostel and borrow somebody's phone. There's a phone there, calling the lawyer in Thailand, and he's not answering the phone. I'm emailing him. He's not answering the emails. And I arrived at this hostel. Like again, I was like, I'm not only going to be there a day. Just get some cheap, crappy hostel. It was boiling hot. There's mosquitoes flying around. I'm worried that have I been ripped off? What's going on? It's like very late in the UK, so I wanted to call someone. There's no one to speak to because it's like 2 a.m. And I remember just feeling so desperate in that moment because it was like everything. I gave up all my life, my friends, my family, the stability for this dream, and my marriage has just fallen apart. My job's gone. I don't even know if I can legally stay in the country anymore. And that was like a real low point. And I remember in desperation, I called my wife because we were still on talking terms. We were still on good terms. And I was like, I just want somebody to tell me it's going to be okay. And she panicked. She's like, what if you've been ripped off? They may have stolen your money. You might not be allowed in the country. And it was like all my internal fears were being projected back. And I thought, oh man, I'm not going to get any support here. And I took a breath and started to just try and calm her down. But I was actually doing it for myself because I realized her fears were my fears. And I was like, I'm alone. This is my bed, and I need to lay in it. And that was a real pivotal moment there because it was so far from everything that I came there for. And not many people knew that. Like, of course, I was talking to friends and family, but people back in the UK were just like, oh, he's living on a beach, that lucky guy, like he's got it so easy. And I was like, wow, if only you knew, actually, like it's pretty damn far from the paradise that you might think that I'm living in. That was a real turning point because I at that point realized that it's all about me. I can't rely on anyone here. And if I want to make a new life for myself, it's going to have to be different to what the original dream was. And I need to just be relentless and not give up because there are a lot of obstacles in the way.
Can I ask you, David, because I can't even begin to imagine how it is to have these things stuck in one on top of the other. So your marriage, your job, your visa, everything being crushed, all the dreams that you have one after the other. I can only imagine the kind of mental and emotional despair that you...
And I was also getting kicked out of my apartment as well.
Oh,
So
right.
that just added, that was happening at the same time.
Did you have any at any point did you start wondering why is this happening to me?
So there was a point where I remember thinking, because I did know some people there that were working for not for retreats, for hotels, or for I had a friend that was working in a school there. I had another friend in marketing that I made, and their companies kind of took care of the visa and often provided them with an apartment and the expat package. And I remember thinking, oh man, why couldn't I do that? Like, I've chosen to do this thing independently, but it looks so easy. Like they didn't even have to find their own apartment. They get spending money to pay for the doctor. Like, and it wasn't so much why me, but I was like, oh man, what am I doing wrong here? Something's wrong. It seems to be like just plain sailing, I'm not saying that's the truth, but that's how it felt. Looking at like, oh wow, if I'd got on this cushy expat, corporate deal with whatever company, then all my problems would be solved. And I felt very frustrated in the fact that I had made plans. It wasn't like I just went on a whim, and they'd all just totally gone to shit pretty much. So that there was a frustration around, oh, I've planned this out and it's totally gone the opposite way to
So
how I'd intended.
how did you bounce back from all that since when you reached that low point? Because a decision, of course, is the first step, but how did that decision change your actions and the way you were thinking about the situation?
Yeah, well, the way I remember on that phone call, I realized that no one wants this as much as me, and also that even if so to finish that story, that I thought even if I have lost the visa or I have been ripped off, even if it means having to come back to the UK and work for however many months to get the money to come back, I'm going to do that. It won't be the end. I have a strong desire to work here, to create a life here, and to support people, and whatever it takes, I'm going to do. These are just inconveniences, and also it was I think not a build up. Yeah, I mean it was a build up. There were things like the marriage. That had been problematic. I was going there because I wanted to try and make things better, but it was like, well, I've had this build up of problems, and now I just need to be willing to face the music and feel and deal with all the uncomfortable discussions and conversations with my wife that I hadn't really had or were very difficult in the previous 2 years. And I'm like, well, look, I know I can do it. If this is what it takes, I'm willing to do it. So there was a willingness to kind of go through the pain barrier that hadn't been there. And there was a realization, it's all on me. It's not like I can't expect other people to help me because they've got their own lives. And also knowing that I would be okay. It might feel like the end of the world, but it would be an inconvenience if I had to go back to the UK, or I had to do some other kind of work. It wouldn't be the end. It would just be an inconvenience. So that was a real mindset shift for me, that really helped me through that, because otherwise, yeah, you kind of get into that, oh, it's not fair, and other people have it easier, and why is this happening to me? That which was not going to help me. I didn't have a choice. It was like either I get better or I sink. There were the only two options. And I think that was the cool thing about being in those circumstances. It didn't, yeah, maybe I would have sunk and like everything had gone, but I was like, no, I don't want to choose that option. And so, yeah, whatever it takes, I need to put in the work to make that happen. And yeah, it was very binary, the choice of, well, you either go back and just give up, or you continue going forward, and it's going to be difficult, and yeah, and that's okay. That's just part of the process.
I like very much. You describe this determination that you had to remain, and you said the strong desire. That's the words you used. That gave you the motivation to carry on. I like very much when you use the word inconvenience for something like that. It's a very good description, linguistic description of what it is, and makes things feel a bit better. Can I ask you, You already mentioned quite a few, but if I were to ask you what's the biggest lesson you've learned from this adversity, which one would you consider would be the biggest one?
I think the biggest one would be honesty, because that had been at the heart of where I'd been messing up within my marriage. I hadn't been honest from the beginning of the marriage. I hadn't been honest with my ex-wife. I hadn't been honest with myself about how really unhappy I was, and that had, well, we'd continued the marriage, but it hadn't really been going particularly good for either of us. And being willing to be honest about the fact that I hadn't been honest, and talk to her about that. Like, it wasn't like I cheated on her or anything like that, but it's just about what had happened before we'd been married, and how I was actually feeling within the marriage. That was really difficult for me because it was something that I'd screwed up on, and I'd seen the consequences and the negative effects of lying, and also the fear that I had about just being who I was, because I wanted somebody, my ex-wife, to really love me, and so kind of presented a certain version of events that I thought she would like, which she did, but that wasn't really who I was. And so realizing actually it's better to fail being who you are than succeed on a lie. And that was a really brutal lesson, because there were the cost of getting divorced, the pain of getting divorced, the stress of getting divorced. It was a massively difficult lesson to learn, but it made me realize I need to be more honest, and in relationships, in my work, in everything, and to be myself more. And if I'm not good enough, then, well, what can I do to get better? Like, for example, something that had been a lifelong fear of mine had been driving. And it's I was always scared of driving. I passed my test third time in the UK, and when I got to Thailand, I was like, the driving there is mental. It's like legitimately dangerous. It's like the one of the highest road deaths in the world. But I knew also, if I wanted to be independent, I need to drive. So that was something I wasn't good enough at, and so I was very much like, well, look, yeah, I'm scared. Of course, I don't want to die. But if I can put myself in this situation in a controlled environment to a degree, like I'm not going to head out on the highway on my first trip, then so be it. Like, it's scary, and I'm worried, and that's okay. Like, my threshold for discomfort was also another lesson. Like, it's okay to feel uncomfortable, like physically, emotionally, mentally. It's okay, because that's required to get better at life. And I think that was also really important, the honesty and the threshold of discomfort, because from living a very stable life, I was in a job, I had a house, I was married, I had a friend network, I had a social network. Everything was kind of, it could have run on autopilot almost in London, and then take that away. I had to increase my threshold of discomfort, because I didn't know, if I could legally stay there. I didn't know if I could get the work. I didn't know what was going on with my marriage, and there was so much uncertainty. And I was like, that's okay. That's just the way it is. If I want to get to where I want to go, I need to be okay with that. And that was very different to trying to manage everything and trying to always pick the safest option and always keep the stability in life.
Absolutely, it's one of those things that really empower you as a person. Of course, not with everyone. Some other people would let that cripple them and tear them down, but these situations in one's life are the ones that it's when you fight with your worst fear or some of your worst fears, and you go through to the other side and you realize that the person that you have become because of those adversities was worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And like when you picked up on it's an inconvenience, I realized a lot of the fears that I had, they were just inconveniences. Like if I had to go back to the UK, or if I didn't get this job, or if the work required to get a divorce. Yeah, it was difficult, but I wasn't being asked to mine in a gulag in outer Siberia. It was, yeah, there's some difficult emotions related to getting a divorce. There's some obstacles required into getting a visa, or there's some challenges around getting the work. But it wasn't like I realized, I'm just catastrophizing stuff and being way dramatic about stuff that isn't. It's an inconvenience, and it's difficult and it's challenging, but I can do it. Yeah, it's not. I'm not being asked to run the Siberian desert like barefoot or something. It's just like, yes, there's some difficult emotions and some inconvenience. Deal with that. Okay, right now let's do it.
Yeah, and it just goes to prove that the words that we use to play the story inside our mind is what really creates the experience. David, let me ask you something slightly different. I was reading something that you wrote about the people taking those 2 week retreats and doing, detox or Reiki or things like that, which you see it like escaping, and that's the word retreat as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
Escaping the reality, and then you say that this is really a temporary measure, and you were envisioning to use these 2 weeks on someone rather than being a retreat, to actually use it for people to face the situation that they want to retreat from. So
yeah.
what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was my observation, because I was working in some of these retreats, and they're, I think it is great to take a few weeks out to get pampered, to live in a very beautiful surroundings, and some people's stress levels are so high that is a really healthy thing for them to do. Uh, but the problem with it is that then they just go back to the same thing that was causing them to feel like they needed to get away. And so it's this cycle that isn't actually, nothing's getting better other than for 2 weeks, which is a problem, because if you're proposing that come here and we're going to make you a better person, we're going to help you this, and relieve the stress, help you feel more confident, etc. But really, you're not. You're just pampering someone, which can be. I'm not trying to deny that there is benefits, or that cannot, or that isn't helpful for some. So what I my the way I was envisaging it was to look at what are the things that are going on in your life that are making you feel like you need to run away, or what is your relationship to them, more precisely. Is it what you think you need to be in order to feel successful, and that's why you stuck in this corporate job that you hate but you believe you need to be in? Could it be the relationship with a family member that is stressing you out, and that if you could relate to that person differently, or your emotions around them, and maybe have a more honest conversation, potentially things could shift, and that could make the 50 years of the week much better rather than just the 2 weeks. So that was my approach to that. That was what I saw as what I really wanted to bring to the program, because they were doing they're very much people come there for programs, and the health stuff. There was some really great work. So I don't want to sound like I'm being condescending, because there was a lot of cool stuff around fitness and nutrition, which I think is so important. But without the emotional work, tends to be temporary, because people won't, not won't, but often don't stick to it. And there's usually an emotional reason. If somebody's not paying attention to what they're eating all the time, or they're not giving their body the care that it needs, there's usually an emotional reason that is not being addressed. And so that was my my vision for that. And I did do some work within that was cool. You know, there was there was some like decent work that I did within those retreats. There was a lady that I worked with, specifically helping her with a work relationship that she'd been really struggling with. She was a TV producer, very like, successful, but had some pretty severe problems in her work life, that when we got into conversation and got her to be more honest about what was going on, and what she, you know, the conversation she needed to have, and why she was paying, or why she was caring so much what other people thought was the main thing, that she did like make a big transformation, and we kept in touch, and that was a permanent shift. But it was because it wasn't because I was working within the program of what was already going on, and there were, like I said, certain conflicts of interest as far as the job that I was doing, or politics on, because there was lots of different, it wasn't just me, there was like someone doing Reiki, someone doing like some energy healing, somebody doing, there was about 6 people doing different things, and it was like who gets on best with the manager will get the referrals. And I was like, I don't really want to play that game. I'm just here, I want to help people. And there was too many, oh, you can't, it has to be done this way, and you can't do it like this way. And so that was not really satisfying me in what I actually wanted to achieve there. Not saying that I think you couldn't do great work in that kind of context, but for me at that point, it wasn't really doing it. I was like, I didn't move halfway across the world to get to do this. It was like, I want to do something more meaningful and more powerful than just the odd session here and there when I can fit it in.
Talking about meaningful then brings me nicely to the next thing I wanted to ask you about some, as you say, of the hardest and also the most meaningful work that you've done when you were working with breast cancer survivors, so with a charity organization. So I want to ask you, what were your realizations from this, the meaningful work? And there are some other things that I want to discuss, but tell me first, what were the things that you realized working with these women?
The first thing that I realized was really the strength of the human spirit. And it was with a charity called Semi on Vacation. And the thing that really just blew me away, I maybe your listeners, I would recommend check this out. There's a whole kind of industry of women that have had breast cancer that do dragon boat racing, which if I don't know if you know what it is. It's like the canoeing. I think it's from China originally, and they ride in these boats with a dragon at the front, and it's like group rowing. And all of the women that were on this, it was a retreat, like they'd won a chance through this charity to come to Thailand to do it. They were all athletes doing this dragon boat racing after having had breast cancer, and the camaraderie and the strength and the dedication they put into that really blew me away. And it was, they said their they didn't want to be victims. They didn't want to feel weak, because there's kind of sometimes a bit of a cultural identity people put on someone after they've had cancer, and they were like, no, we're capable human beings. We're going to come together, and we're going to do this sport, and we're going to compete. And that really just, I was never aware of that beforehand, and it just really impressed me that having been through the difficulty of breast cancer and the chemo and the stress of that they would then start like physically training and taking part in this competition. So that was really impressive to me. And the fact that they were doing this as well, it was a volunteer thing, that these women were coming together and kind of creating a community for themselves, was something that I was so impressed with. The other thing that I realized was that I didn't need to understand them fully, because that I had a lot of insecurity, if I'm honest, when I first, because I did it twice, and the first time I did it, it was it was okay, but I did make some mistakes, and I had a lot of insecurity because I was nervous. I thought, I'm not a woman. I don't, I've never had cancer, and I didn't want to come in like, I'm the guy that knows what you're going through, because I didn't. But I realized that was okay. It wasn't necessary for me to understand everything for me to be in order to help. So that was a second lesson, and the third lesson was definitely the hardest. Was I need to put helping them in front of how I feel, because the first time I went, I remember I worked with a woman who had terminal cancer, and I was everybody in the group had been very concerned about her. She had children, she was depressed, according to them, and so I'd got all this from the group, and so I was a little bit nervous, to be honest, going into the session, because I'd had all this backstory. And anyhow, we get to a session and we start talking about life and what needs most attention right now. And I knew she had children, that she'd been in a bad relationship, and she started to talk about her work, which I knew wasn't the most important thing in her life. And I could tell she was uncomfortable, because just her body language when we were in conversation. But so was I. I was like, oh my God, if I push, she's going to get really upset. And, I don't know if can I resolve that in a session? I'm not sure. And so I didn't say anything. We kind of went along with it. And it was an okay, but nothing really changed for her. And I felt like a fraud, because I was like, I've just bullshitted. Well, we kind of played this game like, oh, you pretend this is important, and I'll pretend with you. But I was just being a bit of a coward in that. And because I thought, if she's crying her eyes out and she gets really emotional, and that frightened me. And I put my fear in front of helping her. And that was not really good enough, because she had children and she's no longer alive. And I felt like I let her down. And that was a really difficult thing to admit, because they were trusting me to come and help them. And so the second time when I did the work with them, I realized, look, I can't be tiptoeing around the important issues. And so we had a group workshop, and I was like, I wanted to talk about what was meaningful in your life, and the fact that we're all going to die, and that each of them had looked death in the eye. Some of them, they didn't have too long to go, and it was really important to really understand what they cared about, why, and then actually start living it, doing what needed to be done, making the changes that needed to be made. And I was really nervous going into it, because similarly, I thought that some women, they might get triggered because they've got terminal cancer, and I'm going to start talking about life and death. but I was like, I can't, I don't want to do the same mistake as I did previously. So I came in, opened the door, started speaking about this, and it was really amazing. Like, I was scared, but I did it. And some of them had never spoken about this in their entire life, let alone in a public context. And I think actually it was more powerful because it was in a group. Because I was like, oh God, if someone gets like bawling their eyes out, and I can't handle this, it will be a disaster because I'm just going to look. It will be in front of the whole group, and worst case scenario. But I was like, no, I need to do it, and I'm sure it's going to be okay. I'm a loving person. I think they know that, and so some people were crying, some people were emotional, but it went really well. And just the fact, what it made me realize was this was a space where they can talk about life and death and fear, because most people just tiptoe around it and don't want to talk about it. And of course it's on their mind, but everyone's just tiptoeing around it. And I wanted to create a space where they can have that discussion without fear, without judgment, and with support. And it was only really through making the mistake of being scared myself. Or, not that it's a mistake to be scared. It's okay to be scared, but making the mistake of choosing to do the easy thing rather than the difficult thing, that was the mistake. And when I chose to like actually talk about something that was relevant to them, very relevant, and look at how we can make the rest of their life as rich and fulfilling as possible, and release anything that needs to be released, then the results got much better. And they really, that was for me, one of the standout things of, well, maybe my life, I'd say. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And we do live in a culture that we tend to avoid talking about death for some reason. Like, it's not an acceptable conversation. Like, if we don't talk about it, somehow we will escape it. So I think it's very important to what you did and what you advocate, to openly talk about the fact that we are all going to die eventually. Can I ask you, so with the women that you were working, but I'm using that as an example, but how can someone who realizes or gets that understanding that maybe my life is reaching at an end, especially when they're dealing with an unexpected serious disease as this, which way or ways do you think it's good to use this understanding for, in order to create some changes in their lives? Because otherwise this understanding may, if it remains as fear, it will really cripple what they can do. So how can someone see around that and turn it to their advantage? I hope my question makes sense.
Yeah, I think I understand it. So like how they can use the
realization that
that they're going to die to help them. So the way that I used it within the work that I did was to help them think, well, what was the purpose? What do I stand for? What do I care about? Like, what is important to me? And it's going to be different things from different people. It could be adventure, or it could be kindness, or it could be love. It depends on the person. What do you care about deeply? When you leave, what would you like people to say about you? Like, that was what I specifically said. There's a ritual that I read about in Korea and in Thailand, where they actually put people in a casket and close the lid for like hours and get them to contemplate their own death. And I told them, and I actually joked about it, like we're going to bring in some caskets. Like we didn't, but it was just going to break the tension a little bit. And the point was to contemplate, well, how would you like people to remember you? What do you care about in life, and why? And then actually, then this was that was, believe it or not, that was a good bit. That was a nice bit. The harder bit was to then say, well, during the last 30 days, how many times did you actually demonstrate an example of doing something connected to that? So, like if you say, I really value creativity, how creative have you been in the last 30 days? Or if you're like, I really value kindness, well, when was an example of being kind, not just thinking it, but doing it? And that was difficult because people come up with, oh, I value freedom, or I value passion, or I value, like, it all sounds great. And then it's like, well, okay, oh, by the way, during the last month, how often did you actually do anything connected to that? And that was difficult because not for everybody, but for some people, it was a bit of a shock because it's like, I haven't done anything connected to that, the thing that I'm saying, if I was to die, would be the most important. I've done nothing. And that was really difficult. But it was to really bring home, well, look, this is where your life's heading if you don't make any changes. So then to look at, well, what could you do to start bringing that into your life, and what perhaps are the blockages or perceived blockages to doing it. And that was the way that we, when I was working with those women, utilized it, because I was like, you're in a very unique position. Not most people, everyone's going to die. Most people just don't consciously realize it. You do. You've looked it in the eye. If you get chemo, it's incredibly difficult, and you will have thought about, well, what if this and what if that. You've had that realization, and you realize how precious every moment is. So let's look at now what you care about, and look at what could you start bringing into your life. What do you need to change? What do you need to do? Because you've actually had an understanding that most people don't, of how precious life is. And so that, I think, is the advantage, if you will, because of course it's precious for everyone, but most people were just unaware that they could go at any moment. Whereas if you've been diagnosed with something, it's like, no, you're now aware of your own mortality, and there's a tick-tock of time going down. Let's use this to make the most of it. And I know that's easier to say than to do, but that was what we were doing together as a group. And that was some of the best work, or for me, the most important work I've done.
Thank you, David. You answered my question 100%. That was exactly what the kind of answer I was looking for. Let me ask you about something different, and that's an event that you are running, which is the Virtual Life Wellbeing Festival. So, do you want to talk to me about this?
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that. Yeah, so on August the 22nd, I'm doing an event. It's going to be UK time, 11 till 2 p.m. And it was a concept that I've been involved in doing some charity work while I've been in lockdown, doing online events, kind of online. It was an online house party that I was organising, getting DJs in, getting musicians in to play music. We were raising money for COVID relief charity. And also I was getting in people to do like cooking, like vegan cooking, and exercise, dance classes, and I do, talks myself on Facebook about life coaching, etc. And this was all on Facebook, and then the campaign ended, And I was like, actually, I really enjoyed that. And the thing I enjoyed was the fact that it was a bit more, for me personally, exciting. It wasn't like we have to do. Sometimes the wellness stuff for me can not. I don't say I'm condescending. It can be a bit boring. It's like everybody has to wear like white robes, and we all have to listen to whale music, and like that's not really my background. I like I like electronic music. I like dancing. I like being silly. I like art, and I thought, why not? Let's combine this in a bit of a mishmash, and have a fun event about connecting people from different parts of the world. And I'm going to do a mini workshop on creating a meaningful life within that. And we got a lady from Germany who's an award-winning hip-hop dancer. She's going to be doing some hip-hop dance. We have a friend of mine who actually I met, that she works in the retreats in Thailand. She's a Chinese yoga teacher based in Shanghai. And also a guy who came to one of my workshops in Bangkok who's a violinist. He's a classical violinist. So I love music. I like dance. I like fitness and yoga. And I thought, let's combine this. And the cool thing is everybody's in different parts of the world. And my intention is to bring in people from Germany, UK, Thailand, Shanghai, and specifically because living in Thailand, I made a lot of friends from China, and it's very difficult as a foreigner to do events there because it's like a whole ecosystem that you can't get into if you don't speak Chinese. And so I was like, I'd love to do something. I mean, it's like there's only 1.5 billion. There's a lot of Chinese people, but it's like we're cut off because of this, the Great Chinese Firewall. And I'm hoping that with working with my friend from China, that we can connect people. We can like come together, in different backgrounds, and create an international event online and share some ideas. And that's my ambition for this, and
Sounds
I'm really excited.
Sounds very interesting, and I wish you all the best with it. We can put
Yeah,
the link in the show notes for people to check it
cool.
out.
Yeah, and it's free as well. So if anyone wants to come, you just the tickets are free. So it's the main thing. I was like, I want to connect as many people from different places and see what we can create from there.
Awesome. David, let me ask you some quick fire questions as well.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Okay.
what does personal development mean to you?
To me, it means going beyond the current limitations that you're setting yourself and reaching new potentials, whether that is in your relationships, in your work, or physically, mentally. That in a nutshell is what it would mean to me.
Thank you. Let's say you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self. So, what's the one piece of advice you would give him?
It's okay to do things and to fail. Like, that's fine. Like, no one's really paying attention. And if they are, then who cares? It's not a big deal. So it's okay. That's part of the process. That's what be the advice that I would give to him.
That's great. No, I'm laughing because of what he said. No one's really paying attention, except ourselves when we are so young,
Yeah,
and we think that it's everyone will be noticing what we
exactly.
do.
Yeah. Everybody's just waiting for you to screw up.
Yeah.
Like, on you like a hawk. Yeah.
David, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change something in the world as it is today, what would you change?
I would change the I would want, if I could change anything, I would want everybody to have access to resources, to food, and yeah, to have that, because from living in Thailand, that just seeing the level of poverty that exists, and how I believe that's limiting the human potential, because there could be Mozart sweeping the sidewalk for all we know, and that person just doesn't have the access to the resources, basic stuff, education, even food, that would enable them to like help the human species to evolve. So that, for me, I think if there was more equality to resources.
Fantastic. Is there anything you were hoping I would ask you today and I completely missed it? You know, we briefly talked in the beginning that there were so many directions.
Why didn't you ask me, Agi? I told you. That time I met the celebrities. No, I think that there was nothing specific. There is one thing I wanted to talk about. Through the experience I've had, I created an online program which is about meaningful life, and that was really a culmination of those last 2 years of my going to Thailand, and the relationship and the work and all of the adversity that had happened during that time. And the irony was that I'd gone there because I wanted a meaningful life, and then it just fell apart spectacularly, and I had to create something new. And so I wanted to make or to do a program with helping other people to give more meaning to their life, and create whatever that might be for them, for the relationships or the work or their fitness, or a culmination of that. So that was that's something that I'm currently doing, and I've in the middle of doing the first iteration of that, which has been good fun. And it was something, again, like came from lockdown. I hadn't really planned on doing it, but that happened, and it was the way forward. So
That's great. So what's the best way for people to connect with you?
So if you look up David Bailey, life coach, on Facebook, I'm pretty active on there. I've got like a page and also my personal site. And if anybody's interested in coming to the Virtual Life Wellbeing Festival, go onto my personal page, and there's going to be event links and such on there. Yeah.
That's brilliant. David, I want to thank you very much for your time and for sharing this experience and some outstanding distilled knowledge. That's how I would call it, and sharing that with us today. I want to wish you all the very best. Any parting words?
Thank you very much for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure. And I think for anybody that is looking to give more meaning to their life, then it's like where we put our attention and our willingness to, not necessarily, it's for some people the small risk can feel like a big risk. Our willingness to be able to be with some level of discomfort is what enables us to kind of create beyond where we are. So that would be the parting words.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Agi. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Please take a moment to subscribe and review Personal Development Mastery on Apple Podcasts, and also share this podcast with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to gain access to exclusive content while supporting this podcast, then become my patron. The link is in the show notes, or you can type bit.ly/pdmpad. If you want to know more about what I do and how I can help you, or if you have any questions, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. Again, the link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/pdmgroup. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.